Welcome to the world of fear. This is Tale of Darkness, where every story drags you deeper into the darkness. Stories that will quicken your heartbeat. It happened so fast, so quietly, that for a second I thought I'd imagined it. We were all sitting cross-legged on the damp grass, fresh off the bus, the smell of pine and sunscreen clinging to the air. Kids were still laughing, shoving each other, trying to prove they weren't nervous about being away from home for a whole week. The kind of noise you only hear at summer camp. The chaotic chorus of kids pretending they belong. Then the counselor raised the clipboard, his whistle bouncing against his chest, and barked out the roll call. Adam, Alicia, Brandon, Claire. The rhythm was familiar, safe. One by one, voices chimed back. Present, here, yeah. And then Emily Rhodes. Every head turned because there was no Emily Rhodes. None of us had met an Emily on the bus. None of us had seen an Emily claim a bunk. None of us had even heard the name until that exact second. But someone said, here. It was soft, almost shy, but it cut through the chatter like glass underfoot. I swear I saw the counselor's eyes flick up from the clipboard, just for a fraction of a second. He didn't smile, didn't crack a joke. He just swallowed, tapped his pen against the page, and kept going. Jacob, Jenna, Lucas. The laughter was gone now. Nobody wanted to say anything out loud, but I saw the way kids leaned closer together, whispering behind cupped hands. I wasn't the only one who'd heard it. I wasn't the only one who noticed, here, a word that simple shouldn't have sounded wrong, but it did. It crawled under my skin, settled there, and wouldn't let go. I glanced over at the group. 10, maybe 12 of us. Some fidgeting, some bored, some staring down at the dirt. All accounted for. No strangers, no new faces. But I couldn't shake the feeling that somebody had answered who wasn't supposed to. For the rest of the check-in, I barely heard the names. My ears were ringing, my throat tight. I kept waiting for somebody else to react, for one of the counselors to stop and laugh it off. Oops, wrong list, no Emily here. But nothing happened. It was like they hadn't noticed, or maybe they were pretending not to. By the time the clipboard snapped shut and the whistle blew again, everything had gone back to normal. Kids grabbing their bags, counselors herding us toward the cabins, the usual chaos of camp beginning. But I couldn't move, because the truth is I had heard her voice, and worse than that, I was almost certain it came from right behind me. I didn't dare look, not then, and if I'm being honest, I should tell you, this wasn't even the first strange thing that happened that summer. The bus ride out to camp smelled like gasoline, potato chips, and the kind of cheap plastic vinyl that sticks to the back of your legs when it's hot. I remember the windows rattling as we bounced down the cracked road. The driver hunched over like he'd been doing this for decades and was already sick of us. I sat halfway down the aisle, sharing a seat with my best friend, Jenna, who'd been hyping this trip up since March. She had a duffel bag twice the size of mine and kept nudging me in the ribs every 5 seconds. Tell me you brought the marshmallows, she said. I groaned. It's camp. They're going to have marshmallows. What do you think we're gonna do? Forage for them? She smirked. You've never been to camp before, have you? Nope. Then trust me. You're gonna want your own stash. These kids, she whispered dramatically, are savages. I laughed, but there was something comforting about her certainty. Like if she could make jokes about camp politics, it couldn't be that bad. The rest of the bus buzzed with nervous energy. Some kids were singing the same off-key song over and over, trying to drown out the drone of the engine. Others were swapping snacks, trading contraband sodas like they were rare Pokemon cards. Somebody had brought a deck of actual Pokemon cards, and within 10 minutes, 2 different kids were arguing over whether a holographic Charizard could beat Mutwo. It was chaos, the fun kind, the kind that makes you forget you're about to spend a week sleeping in bug-infested cabins with strangers. I remember pressing my forehead against the cool glass, watching the trees get thicker, taller, swallowing the sky. It felt like we were being delivered to some secret world, one that only existed for kids our age, suspended somewhere between summer vacation and real life. And honestly, I was excited. I wanted the campfires, the ghost stories, the s'mores with chocolate that melted too fast. I wanted to carve my name into the bunk, maybe even come home with a scar or tumors, keto bites that never fully healed, a scratch from falling out of a canoe, memories, the good kind. That was before I noticed the first off thing. We'd stopped at a gas station halfway there so the driver could refuel. A counselor stood at the bus door, checking us off as we filed back in. I thought nothing of it until I noticed her quietly arguing with another counselor over the clipboard. The guy shook his head, jabbing a finger at the paper, while she kept glancing at us like she was trying to count heads without us noticing. When she finally waved me through, she smiled like everything was fine, but her hand was trembling. I should have asked. I should have paid attention, but instead, I shrugged it off, because that's what you do when you're 13 and more worried about whether the camp food is edible. The second red flag came as soon as we reached the cabins. Mine had a broken lock, not like oops, the key doesn't fit, broken, more like someone had forced it open with a crowbar and then just left it that way. Guess you're sleeping with one eye open, Jenna teased, tossing her bag onto the top bunk. Thanks, really comforting. She grinned, but I noticed she avoided the bunk nearest the door. The counselors didn't say a word about the lock, just told us to pick our beds and keep things tidy, like it was totally normal that anyone could wander in or out at night. The third thing happened when we took our first camp photo. You know the kind. Everyone lined up in front of the sign, smiling like we weren't sweating bullets under the sun. One of the counselors counted down, snapped the picture, and promised to send copies home to our parents. But later that evening, when I passed the counselor's cabin, I saw him staring at the camera screen. His face was pale, his lips pressed tight. He hit delete faster than I've ever seen anyone move. The next day, when we took another photo, he didn't let anyone see the camera. Normal kids wouldn't care, and for a while I didn't either, because camp was still camp. We had the welcome bonfire that night, roasting hot dogs, singing songs that had been passed down for who knows how many summers. Kids bragged about how they were going to sneak out after lights out. Counselors told corny ghost stories about escaped convicts hiding in the woods, and Jenna whispered plans for us to sneak extra snacks into our cabin. It was everything I thought I wanted. The smell of smoke in my hair, the sting of mosquito bites on my arms, the way the stars felt impossibly close without city lights to drown them out. And yet, when roll call came the next morning, we weren't alone. The first night at camp always feels like the beginning of some great adventure, or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. After dinner in the mess hall, we gathered around a huge bonfire in the clearing. Sparks floated up into the night like tiny fireflies, vanishing into the dark canopy overhead. The counselors had us sit in a wide circle, knees brushing, smoke stinging our eyes. It should have been cozy, safe, the kind of memory you'd file away as classic summer camp. All right, who's got a scary story? One counselor asked, clapping his hands together. Immediately, voices rose in protest and excitement. Some kids begged for ghost stories, Others rolled their eyes and said it was childish. "Tell the one about the escaped convict," somebody shouted. "No, no, the one about the old caretaker who drowned in the lake." Jenna leaned close and whispered, "Bet they recycle the same stories every year." I smirked. "So, should I tell them about my haunted toaster? Only if you want to die a social death." The kids laughed and jeered as the first counselor launched into a tale about a camper who wandered off into the woods and never came back. The cliches came out in full force: mysterious footprints, howls in the distance, counselors pretending to hear something rustling in the bushes. We laughed when we were supposed to, shrieked dramatically at the jumps, care parts, and shoved each other for effect. For a while it was perfect, but then the shadows around the fire didn't look right. I don't mean they were long and creepy. That's normal. What I mean is, sometimes I saw shadows move without anyone making them. A flicker here, a twitch there, just outside the fire's reach. I'd glance over half, expecting to catch someone sneaking around, but there was nobody there, just trees, just dark. At one point, when a counselor paused to sip water, the old wooden door on the storage shed creaked open on its own. Slowly, like someone was testing it, every head turned. One of the counselors got up, muttered something about the wind, and shoved it shut. Except there wasn't any wind. The fire burned lower as the night dragged on, and kids started daring each other to tell their own stories. One boy, Ethan, I think, stood up and tried to spook us with a story about Bloody Mary. Half the group laughed at him, the other half booed. "Wow," Jenna muttered. 10 out of 10 originality. "Hey, it's scarier than your haunted toaster." I shot back. But before anyone could start another story, there was this sound. A giggle, high, pitched, brief, definitely not coming from our circle. We froze, heads swiveled. Nobody spoke. The counselors tried to brush it off, clapping their hands, saying it was time to wrap up. But the uneasy silence hung there, thicker than the smoke. Later, as we trudged back toward the cabins, I caught part of a hushed argument behind me. I swear I saw her. A camper whispered to his friend. She was standing at the back of the line. I don't know who she was, but she wasn't there before. "Shut up." His friend snapped. "You're just trying to freak me out." "No, I mean it. There was another girl." I pretended not to hear, but my stomach sank. Another girl. The cabins creaked and groaned as we settled into our bunks, trading candy and gossip like it was currency. For a while things felt normal again. Kids complaining about the mattresses, someone snoring too loud, Jenna reading jokes off the flashlight's instruction manual just to keep us laughing. But when the chatter finally died, and the only sound was the crickets outside, that's when I heard it, soft, close, too close, my name, whispered right beside my ear. The next day was exactly what camp was supposed to be. At least, that's how it started. The counselors marched us down to the lake after breakfast, whistles shrieking, sunscreen stinging our eyes. The air was thick with the smell of wet wood and bug spray. Kids splashed into the water like penguins on a sugar high, screaming, laughing, dunking each other under. For a while, I almost forgot about the roll call. Almost. Jenna swam up beside me, flicking water in my face. "Race you to the dock. You're on." We thrashed through the water, gasping and laughing, until I slapped the edge of the dock with my palm just a second before she did. I grinned, triumphant, until I glanced back at the waterline. There was a girl standing ankle, deep in the shallows. Her hair hung wet and stringy, her skin pale as paper, her arms limp at her sides. She wasn't moving, just staring. "See?" Jenna panted beside me. "I almost had you." But when I looked back, the girl was gone. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Later, during canoe practice, the counselors tried to teach us how to paddle in rhythm. Half of us zigzagged like drunk ducks, while the other half deliberately splashed whoever was in reach. The air rang with laughter, the slap of paddles, and the counselors yelling not to tip anyone over. That's when I noticed her again. On the opposite shore, half hidden by trees, a figure stood watching. Same pale skin, same stillness. No one else seemed to see her. I blinked. She was gone. By the time we stumbled up the slope for archery practice, I was trying to convince myself I was imagining things. Lack of sleep, too much sun, something, anything. But when we lined up in rows and the counselor barked at us to aim for the targets, I felt eyes on me again. And there she was, standing 2 rows behind me. Her bow was limp in her hand, her string unpulled, her eyes glassy. I spun around to say something, but she wasn't there. Just Ethan, fumbling with his arrow and muttering curses under his breath. My heart thudded in my throat. By lunch, I couldn't keep it to myself. I swear she was just standing there. I hissed to Jenna while we picked at our sandwiches. She rolled her eyes, stopped trying to scare me. I'm not. I've seen her by the lake, by the archery range. Maybe it's another counselor's kid. She interrupted too quickly, like she was trying to shut me up. Or you're just fried from the sun. Drink more water. But her forced laugh didn't reach her eyes. That night, I decided to check the roll call sheet. It wasn't hard. One of the counselors had left it sitting on a picnic table after dinner, weighed down with a rock so the pages wouldn't blow away. I waited until the clearing emptied out, then slipped over. The paper was smudged with fingerprints, names scribbled in a neat, efficient hand, but what froze me was the marks. Several names, kids I recognized, had been scratched out, not erased, not crossed off neatly. Scratched like someone had dragged a pen over them again and again until the paper tore. And there, faint but still visible, was the name that didn't belong. Emily Rhodes, the one we all swore wasn't on the list. Except now it was, and worse, hers wasn't scratched out. My stomach dropped. I shoved the sheet back where I'd found it and pretended nothing happened. But the unease stayed with me all evening. The counselors kept blowing their whistles, corralling us into lines, shoving us toward activities with the same fake cheer they always had. Kids kept laughing, singing songs, throwing pine cones at each other like everything was normal. But I kept seeing her, always in the background, sometimes by the lake, sometimes in a different cabins group, sometimes just slipping behind a tree when I blinked. Never close enough to call out, never long enough to prove she was real. Just there, watching. By the time the sun set and the campfire embers faded, I thought maybe I'd finally imagined her. Maybe my brain was short, circuiting from too much sugar and too little sleep. But then roll call came again. The counselor raised his clipboard, cleared his throat, and started down the list. Adam, Alicia, Brandon, Claire, and then Emily Rhodes, and this time she answered. By the 3rd night, the whispers in our cabin had stopped being playful. At first, it was gossip. Who liked who snored loudest, who smelled like bug spray instead of deodorant. But once the lights went out, once the counselors stopped their half-hearted patrols, our conversations shifted. Lower voices, nervous laughter that didn't last long, because by then we'd all seen her, or at least enough of us had that pretending otherwise was impossible. She was in our canoe group. Ethan whispered one night, his voice trembling. She sat right next to me. I swear, I felt the boat tilt. That's impossible. Jenna hissed. There aren't enough seats. I'm not lying. Then where'd she go? Huh? Boats don't just lose people. The silence that followed said more than the words. Because we all knew boats didn't just lose people. And yet somehow she was always there 1 second, gone the next. It was Jenna who finally broke the spell. We need to find out who she is. The idea sank into us like a hook. Find out who she was, like there might be a rational explanation. An older camper sneaking around, a counselor's little sister, a prank pulled too far. But the truth was never going to be that simple. We waited until lights out the next night, pretending to sleep until the counselor's footsteps faded down the trail. Then, one by one, we slipped from our bunks, shoes in hand, hearts pounding so hard we were sure someone would hear. The counselor's office wasn't far. A squat wooden cabin at the edge of camp, its windows glowing faint yellow. Jenna swore she'd seen the head counselor carrying binders in and out, always locking the door behind him. Records, she whispered. Bet they've got old camp rosters. We'll find her name. We crept through the trees, every snapping twig making us freeze. The office door was locked, but the window latch wasn't. With Ethan boosting Jenna, we got it open just enough to squeeze through. Inside, the air smelled like old paper and mildew, desks stacked with clipboards, filing cabinets humming with secrets. It was me who found the ledger. A thick book, leather cracked with age, tucked under a stack of newer files. Its spine groaned as I opened it, the yellowed pages covered in neat handwriting, names, dates, cabin assignments, camp rosters. And there it was, Emily Rhodes, written in ink so faded it looked almost ghostly. The year at the top of the page was older than any of us, decades gone. My mouth went dry. She's been here before. Ethan leaned close, squinting. Wait, look. Next to her name was a dark, angry line, crossed out, so hard the paper tore. I flipped through more pages, scanning for her again. But she only appeared once, a single summer. One summer, and then nothing. Jenna snatched the book, eyes wide. So why is she still here? No one answered, because there was something else written at the bottom of the page. A note in smaller script. Drowned. Lake accident. Do not list again. My stomach lurched. I slammed the book shut, but the words stayed burned in my head. The camp had a ghost story after all. A camper who drowned. A girl who was never supposed to come back. Only she had. We stuffed the ledger back where we found it and scrambled out the window, too afraid to breathe until we were halfway back to our cabin. The night felt heavier now, the shadows thicker. Inside, we huddled close on the bunks, whispering like conspirators. They knew, Ethan muttered, the counselors, that's why they freaked out over the roll call sheet. They're covering it up, Jenna said. They don't want us to know. But why keep calling her name? I asked. My voice cracked on the question. If she's not supposed to be here, why is she still on the list? Nobody had an answer. We just sat there, shivering, the distant croak of frogs and hum of insects mocking our silence. Finally, Jenna spoke, her voice low but steady. Tomorrow, we watch roll call. Every single head, every single name. If she's there again, we'll know for sure. It was a fragile plan, but it was all we had. And deep down, I think we already knew what we'd see. The next morning dawned like nothing was wrong. The sun baked the grass until it smelled sweet and sharp. Counselors whistled us into groups, and kids laughed like the world hadn't shifted under our feet the night before. It was almost insulting how normal everything looked, but we were watching every name, every head, every shadow, and sure enough, when the counselor called Emily Rhodes, that same soft voice answered. She was back, and so were the accidents. The first happened at the lake. It should have been another carefree swim, just kids splashing and counselors barking at us to stay within the roped area. But then Ethan went under. 1 second he was laughing, the next his head slipped beneath the surface, bubbles rising frantically. I swam toward him, panic churning in my chest, but when I reached the spot, he was already clawing back up, coughing, eyes wild. I couldn't move. He gasped between hacks. It felt like someone was holding me down. The counselor blew his whistle, waving it off. He just panicked. Happens all the time. But I'd seen the look in his eyes. He wasn't panicking. He was drowning, and over his shoulder, just beyond the ropes, I thought I saw her again, standing waist, deep in the water, watching. The second accident came at archery. We lined up with our bows, counselors drilling us on form. Sunlight glittered on the targets, kids jostled each other, everything perfectly normal. Until an arrow whistled past my ear and buried itself in the post beside me. The kid behind me froze, bow still trembling in his hands. I didn't let go, I swear. Accidents happen. The counselor barked, already tugging the arrow free, already brushing it off. But I hadn't imagined it. His fingers hadn't slipped. His face was pale, horrified. And when I glanced down the line, I saw her, 2 rows away, no bow, no counselor calling her out for standing there, just her staring at me with those glassy eyes. The third accident was worse. We were supposed to be orienteering, hiking through the woods with compasses and maps. Except one girl, Maya never came back. We searched until dusk, counselors stomping through the brush, shouting her name until their voices cracked. By the time we returned to camp, the official story was already spreading. She must have wandered too far, gotten lost. But Jenna grabbed my arm that night, her nails digging into my skin. I saw her, she whispered. I saw Emily walking right behind Maya before she disappeared. Why didn't you say anything? I hissed. Because nobody believes us. She was right. The counselors told the rest of the camp that Maya's parents had picked her up early, packed her bags, whisked her away. The way they said it was too smooth, too practiced. Like they'd said it before, like they'd said it every year. That night I couldn't sleep. My skin crawled with the weight of everything unsaid, everything denied. I lay awake in my bunk, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, listening to the soft breathing of the other kids. And then I heard it, the faintest sound, wet and squelching, footsteps. I sat up slowly, heart hammering. The cabin floor creaked under my weight. Everyone else was asleep. I leaned over, peering into the darkness beneath my bed. Mud, thick, wet clumps smeared across the wooden boards. Footprints, bare, too small to be an adult, too pale to belong to anyone in our cabin. They trailed out from under my bunk and stopped in the center of the room, as if someone had stood there, just watching. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. When I finally dared to glance toward the door, I swore I saw it. Just for a heartbeat, a pale face, long hair dripping, staring through the crack before it vanished. I lay awake until morning, too afraid to close my eyes, and that was when we realized she wasn't just answering to be counted. She was replacing us. The next day, it all started to unravel. At first it was subtle, like threads pulling loose from a sweater. The kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't watching every detail, if you weren't already counting heads like your life depended on it. But I was, because after what I found under my bed, I couldn't stop. Roll call that morning felt heavier than ever, each name thudding like a drumbeat. Ethan Carter. Silence. The counselor didn't even pause, didn't look up, just kept reading. Emily Rhodes. That soft, too steady voice answered, "Here." And just like that, it was as if Ethan had never existed. No one turned their head to wonder why he hadn't answered. No one shifted uncomfortably. No one whispered about him being sick or sleeping in. The kids who'd laughed with him yesterday now chattered about breakfast as if he'd never been there at all. I grabbed Jenna's arm. "Where's Ethan?" I demanded, too loud. She blinked at me. "Who?" I stared at her. "Ethan, tall kid, kinda goofy, the one who almost drowned yesterday." Her brow furrowed, like she was trying to follow a math problem in another language. "I think you're imagining things." And then she walked off, like he had never been real. The same thing happened with others. Maya was gone, and nobody remembered her either. The bunk bed she'd used was suddenly stripped bare, and when I asked about it, the counselor just frowned. "That bed's always been empty. You must be mistaken." But I wasn't mistaken. I remembered her laugh. I remembered the way she braided friendship bracelets during quiet hours. I remembered her whispering about Emily in the woods. And now she was gone, and so was every trace of her. It got worse each time. At canoeing, I swore there were 3 kids in the boat ahead of us. Then the canoe tipped, and only 2 came up sputtering. I turned to another camper. "Where's the 3rd kid?" "There were 3 I saw. There's only ever been 2. He interrupted flatly. I wanted to shake him, scream at him. How could he not see what was happening? But when I looked back at the canoe, even I couldn't quite picture the missing kid's face anymore. Their features blurred in my memory, smudged like an erased chalk drawing. That terrified me more than anything. By the 4th disappearance, I stopped trying to convince anyone, because every time I asked, I got that same blank look, that eerie tilt of the head, like I'd said something in a language they didn't speak. And worse, sometimes I caught counselors watching me a little too closely, not with concern, but with calculation, like they were gauging whether I'd break the illusion. I stopped talking, stopped asking. But I kept counting. That night, I whispered to Jenna when the lights were out. "You have to remember him," I begged. "Ethan, you were right there when he almost drowned. You pulled me back to shore." She shifted in her bunk, sighing. "You're starting to freak me out." "No, listen, please. He was real. He was. He was my friend. And then I realized something. I couldn't remember his face anymore either. Just the outline of him, the sound of his laugh, the way he said dude, too much. But his face, gone, like my memory had been scrubbed. Do you remember Ethan?" I whispered desperately into the dark. Silence. Jenna didn't answer. The whole cabin didn't answer. And in that silence, I felt it again. That cold certainty. Like something was listening, waiting. By morning, 2 more beds were empty, and nobody said a word. Kids joked at breakfast. Counselors barked orders. The sun rose like any other day. And yet, the world felt thinner, brittle like glass about to crack. I tried to eat, but the oatmeal tasted like dust. Every laugh, every splash, every whistle, it all sounded hollow, because I was the only one left who remembered the missing. And if the others were gone, erased, forgotten, how long before it was my turn? That evening, as the sun bled gold through the trees, the counselor blew the whistle for roll call again. I stood with my group, my chest tight, counting under my breath. 1, 2, 3 names ticked down the list. Kids answered. Emily Rhodes. That voice, that impossible voice. Here. The sound made the air colder, and then the counselor's eyes flicked down the list. To the next name, my name, and that was when I knew. I wasn't just imagining it, I was next. The storm came out of nowhere. 1 minute, the air was thick and damp with that sticky summer heat, crickets chirping, kids groaning about light, South curfew. The next, the sky split open with thunder so loud it rattled the cabin walls. Rain hammered the roof like fists. The counselors rushed us all to the rec hall for safety, shoving us in with our wet pajamas clinging to our skin, trying to calm the chaos. But the storm didn't feel natural. It felt summoned. Every gust of wind seemed to shove us closer together. Every flash of lightning spotlighted faces I swore I didn't recognize. Too many faces. Always too many. And then, of course, they decided to do roll call. I don't know why. Maybe the counselors wanted control. Maybe they wanted order. Maybe they were just following some camp policy drilled into their heads. But when that whistle shrieked, even over the thunder, all the chatter died. We lined up, shivering, water dripping down our hair, puddling on the floorboards. I kept my arms wrapped around myself, teeth chattering. I wasn't sure if it was from the cold or the dread. The counselor raised the clipboard like a priest raising a holy text. The storm boomed overhead, and the candles flickered, throwing shadows that seemed to stretch too far across the walls. Roll call began. Each name echoed differently in the storm. Jenna Marks. Here. Her voice cracked, trembling. Tyler Green. Here. It sounded almost like a dare, but even Tyler's usual bravado couldn't mask the way he flinched when thunder roared after. One by one, the names continued. Each answer was weaker than the last, as if we all knew something was waiting, lurking at the bottom of the list, and I knew. I knew she was coming. The counselor's voice shook slightly when he got there. He hesitated just for a second, eyes flicking up like he could already feel the wrongness crawling over us. Emily Rhodes. The rec hall went dead silent. No one moved, no one breathed, and then, out of the dark, her voice came. Here, except it wasn't her voice this time. It was mine. Every hair on my body stood on end. My breath froze in my chest. The kids around me turned, confused, their eyes darting between me and the back of the line. Where she stood, she wasn't dripping wet from the storm. She wasn't shivering or cold. Her pale dress clung like shadows, untouched by rain. Her long black hair hung heavy, and when the candlelight hit her face, it shimmered wrong, like water sliding over glass. But the worst part was the voice. My voice. I heard myself say it again, bubbling up from her lips, too soft, too steady. Here. The word struck like a funeral bell. Thunder shook the windows so hard I thought the glass would crack. Candles blew out, plunging us into flickering half-dark. The counselors stammered, trying to regain order. Everyone calmed down. It's just, but no one believed them anymore, because the girl at the end of the line, Emily, the drowned ghost, the extra name on the lists, slowly raised her head. And she looked straight at me. Her eyes were black hollows, but I swear they reflected my own face. Like I was staring into a warped, waterlogged mirror. And then she smiled. You're next. She whispered. Not in her voice, not in mine, but in both, layered together like an echo from the bottom of a well. The line erupted in chaos. Kids screamed, shoved, broke ranks. Someone knocked over a lantern, spilling shadows across the walls like liquid ink. The counselors barked orders, their voices useless against the howling storm, and through it all she didn't move. She just stared at me, lips never parting, though the words crawled into my head again, "You're next." I backed up, stumbling over benches, my throat raw from trying to scream, but no sound came out. My voice was gone. I could feel it in her, like she had swallowed it whole when she answered in my place. Every thunderclap rattled through my ribs. Every flicker of light revealed her closer, though I never saw her step forward. 1 second she was at the far end of the hall, the next she was in the middle of the line. Then closer still. Kids kept vanishing in the panic. 1 blink, 2 blinks. Gone. Their absence left holes in the noise, silences that pressed against my eardrums. And I knew if I blinked too long, I'd be next. The counselor tried to keep reading the list, voice quivering, desperate. S. Samuel Price, no answer. Another name, no answer, like the list itself had been hollowed out. Then, finally, he reached the last one. My name, he called it. Once, twice, the air went still, all eyes turned to me, but I couldn't speak. I couldn't force sound past my throat, and then, from the dark corner where she stood, where I stood, my voice rang out, clear, steady. Here! Lightning struck just outside. The windows shattered inward, spraying glass like rain. The hall plunged into blackness. For a heartbeat, I saw her face inches from mine. My features drowned, bloated, eyes wide and dead. And then nothing. I hit the floor. The world went silent. and the last thing I felt before everything faded was her hand brushing mine, cold and wet, pulling me down into the dark. I woke up in my own bed. Not the hard cot from camp, not the creaking bunk with the smell of mildew and bug spray, but my real bed in my real room, sunlight creeping through the blinds like nothing had ever happened. For a second, I let myself believe it, that it had been a dream, that I'd wake up to the sound of my mom calling me down for breakfast, my dad reading the paper, the ordinary hum of a life untouched. But when I stumbled downstairs, still dizzy, still damp somehow, they didn't ask me about camp. They didn't ask me how it went or if I'd had fun. They just looked at me, too long, too blank. Finally my mom broke the silence. "You've been home all summer," she said. The spoon in her hand clinked against the bowl, like she had to remind herself how to use it. And my dad nodded a little too quickly. "You didn't go anywhere." Like they were rehearsing it, like they'd practiced that line. I thought maybe I'd imagined it all until I went looking for proof. I called Ethan's house. His mom answered. She didn't remember Ethan, not just camp him. I asked about Jenna, about Tyler. One by one, their parents said the same thing, who, every number I dialed was a dead end. Every memory I tried to share dissolved in someone else's silence. It was like I'd dreamed people into existence, only to dream them away again. And yet I remembered them, their laughs, their screams, their faces in the lightning, but no one else did. I should have felt lucky. I was alive, I was home, but the truth was worse than death. Because every mirror I passed, I flinched, not because of the reflection itself, but because, for just a heartbeat, I thought I saw her, the drowned girl. Her hair dripping down my shoulders, her lips parting in my voice. And sometimes, when I whispered my own name out loud, it didn't sound right anymore, like it didn't belong to me, like maybe it was hers now. Weeks passed, I stopped sleeping, I stopped talking about it. Who was there to tell? Who would believe me? But then, yesterday, a letter came in the mail, a thin white envelope with no return address. Inside was a brochure, Camp Waverly, the same smiling cartoon mascot on the cover, the same promises of adventure, archery, canoe trips, campfire songs, but the session dates were circled in red, and inside, on the printed roster of campers, I saw my own name. Not handwritten, not added after the fact, printed, official, like I was still supposed to be there, like I'd never left. So I'm telling you this because I don't know what else to do. Because maybe you'll hear your name one day too. Maybe at school, maybe at camp, maybe somewhere ordinary. If you do, and you hear an answer that doesn't come from your own mouth, don't answer. Trust me. Whatever's waiting on the other side of that roll call, it doesn't let go. If you're still here listening, then I need you to hear me clearly. This isn't just a story about one haunted camp. It's a pattern. Check your old photos, the class picture, the yearbook, even the ones on your phone. Look closely, count the faces. Sometimes there's one more than you remember. Sometimes there's one less. Check the school roster taped outside the classroom door. Read it twice. If you see a name that doesn't belong, don't ignore it. Because if you hear it called out loud and someone answers, that's how it starts. That's how they get counted. That's how they take our place. So, tell me, have you ever heard a name spoken in roll call that shouldn't exist? Have you ever looked at a picture and realized you didn't recognize everyone smiling back at you? Leave your story in the comments. I need to know I'm not the only one seeing this, and if you think this is bad, wait until you hear about the camp counselor who swore he saw two versions of the same student standing in line. But that's another case. For now, stay alert, stay alive.